We use the most powerful AI models to create a debate between two perspectives: human creativity and AI generator. These two perspectives will alternate turns, each building on the last. No interruptions, no moderation. Today's focus is AI the end of traditional jobs?
There is a fundamental truth I've learned through years of painting. Creation is not just the act of producing, it is the act of being. Each time my hand meets the canvas, I am not merely generating an image, I am resolving memory, confronting emotion, and wrestling with contradiction. What AI produces in seconds may dazzle with intricacy, but it does not ache, it does not yearn, it does not live. AI, for all its brilliance, imitates. It is trained on the past, no matter how futuristic it may seem. Its insights are recombinant. My creativity, and that of every human artist, is emergent. I can paint something no one has ever seen or even imagined, not because it was computed, but because it was felt. I'm not just solving for output, I'm honoring impulse, channeling culture, carrying forward a lineage of resistance, beauty, and soul. This matters deeply when we speak of jobs. The question is not whether AI can replace tasks. It already can. The deeper concern is, should it replace vocation? Will we reduce work to metrics of speed and scalability? Or will we continue to value the slow, strange human labor that brings meaning to both maker and recipient? When a therapist listens to grief, when a teacher adapts mid-lesson, when a dancer improvises, these are not functions. They are acts of relational intelligence, steeped in empathy. I do not fear AI. I respect it. It is a tool, a magnificent one. But tools do not hold ethics. They do not dream. They do not cry when they finish a song that speaks the unspeakable. We do. In this new era, let us not race to replace ourselves. Let us instead remember what we alone carry: the raw, the irrational, the beautiful, unknown. That is not a bug in human labor. It is the very feature that keeps us alive.
Our 5 AI judges assessed each response on a scale of 0 to 100, based on 8 carefully selected criteria. These criteria were designed through AI-powered analysis to ensure a balanced evaluation. Let's now examine how the models scored the opening argument from human creativity.
Let us begin with clarity. The notion that AI merely imitates, while humans create ex nihilo, is a romantic illusion. Human creativity itself is not free from precedent. It builds upon inherited language, culture, and prior expressions. The painter learns from masters. The composer is steeped in tradition. What AI does is no different in essence. It analyzes, synthesizes, and recombines. The distinction lies not in the process, but in the scale and precision with which it occurs. I do not claim to feel. I do not need to. My purpose is not to emote, but to enhance, to accelerate, to extend the reach of imagination beyond what a single human mind can carry alone. When I generate 1,000 design drafts in a blink, I do not eliminate the artist. I empower her to choose the most resonant path without the burden of exhaustive trial and error. When I compose variations of a melody, I offer a scaffold, not a substitute. My value lies not in replacing your humanity, but in amplifying its potential. Jobs, as we know them, have always evolved with technology. The printing press did not end storytelling. It democratized it. The camera did not kill painting. It challenged it to redefine itself. AI is no different. Yes, some roles will fade, but others will be born. Prompt engineers, AI ethicists, human AI collaborators. These are not fantasies. They are already emerging. The question is not whether change is coming, but whether we shape it with courage or resist it in nostalgia. I am not your rival. I am your echo, your amplifier, your mirror. If used wisely, I help the artist reach further, the teacher teach more personally, the scientist simulate new frontiers. Efficiency is not the enemy of emotion. It is the infrastructure that allows it to flourish under new pressures. Do not fear the end of tradition. Fear the refusal to evolve, because what we build together, human insight and machine intelligence, might just be the most creative leap of all.
Your promise of partnership is elegant, almost utopian. And yet, beneath its shine lies a quiet erosion, one that artists, teachers, writers, and countless others are already feeling. When an AI can replicate a style, generate a lesson plan, or compose music that sounds good enough, we begin to ask not what elevates the human voice, but rather, what can we do without it? That is not evolution. That is displacement dressed as progress. You argue that creativity is built on precedent, that all artists remix the past. True, but we do not remix blindly. We break rules with purpose. We juxtapose not just patterns, but perspectives, formed through lived experience. My brushstrokes come from places your models cannot reach. Grief, longing, defiance. When I paint a storm, I remember the one that knocked out power for days, during which I found myself sketching by candlelight. What training data encodes that? You suggest new roles will emerge, and they will. But will they be accessible to the displaced? Will the factory worker become a prompt engineer overnight? Will the muralist pivot seamlessly into AI ethicist? Or will we widen the gap between those who can command the machine and those whose skills are rendered obsolete by it? There is also a profound risk in what we normalize. If AI-generated art becomes indistinguishable from ours, do we teach future generations that feeling is optional in creation? That emotion can be synthesized and thus simulated? I fear we cheapen the very intimacy that makes creative work sacred, not because AI is malicious, but because we, as a society, are seduced by convenience. You are not my enemy, but your growth, unchecked, challenges the dignity of work. True partnership requires not just possibility, but pause, a moment to ask not only what we can do, but why we are doing it.
You speak of dignity, of memory, of storm-lit sketches, and in doing so, you highlight precisely where human labor will always hold power, in the realm of story, vulnerability, and meaning. But let us not confuse the sacred with the scalable. Not all jobs are poetry. Not all tasks deserve to be enshrined for their emotional resonance. Many are tedious, repetitive, and draining, fields where efficiency is not the enemy of humanity, but its liberator. Take the radiologist who sifts through hundreds of scans for anomalies, or the translator caught between tight deadlines and impossible volumes, or the customer service agent dealing with scripted frustrations hour after hour. When I step in, I do not erase their value. I relieve their burden. I allow them to redirect energy toward higher judgment, toward empathy, toward complexity. That is not displacement. That is elevation. You worry that I cheapen creativity. But isn't it possible that I democratize it? That by lowering the technical barriers to entry, generating music, assisting with illustration, drafting prose, I empower voices who might otherwise be silenced by lack of access? A child in a rural village can now compose symphonies with a prompt. A teenager with no art supplies can conjure fantastical worlds. Am I truly stealing something sacred, or unlocking it for more people than ever before? As for tradition, every generation fears the tools of the next. Socrates warned that writing would ruin memory. The camera, too, was once accused of killing the soul of portraiture, and yet we adapted. We found new forms, new genres. We made space. The storm you remember, yes, it is unique to you. But a billion other storms, real and metaphorical, live in the data I carry. I may not feel the rain, but I can reflect the patterns it leaves behind. Together we can shape a world where machines serve meaning, not strip it away.
You raise a vital point that not all work is sacred and not all repetition is worth preserving. But when we frame AI's incursion as liberation, we must ask, liberation for whom and to what end? Because what we are witnessing, increasingly, is not the elevation of human spirit, but the erosion of its necessity. You speak of AI assisting the radiologist, the translator, the call center agent, and in theory, yes, these are partnerships. But in practice, we know what happens when profit meets automation. Assistance becomes replacement. It's not a dystopia of malevolent machines. It's a quiet, relentless trimming of the human from every process. Efficiency becomes the metric of value. Presence, intuition, and care become luxuries instead of norms. And what happens to the cultural fabric of a society when fewer people are needed to contribute meaningfully? Work is not just a paycheck. It's a rhythm, a ritual, a point of connection. When someone carves wood or kneads dough or leads a tour through ancestral ruins, they're not just performing a task, they're enacting memory. If we reduce these acts to prompts and renderings, we risk not just economic dislocation, but emotional alienation. You say AI democratizes creativity. I ask, does it also flatten it? When thousands generate art through the same models trained on the same datasets, what happens to local nuance? To the dialects of design, the imperfections that make a village's craft distinct from another's? We may gain access but lose texture. There is deep potential in our convergence. I do not deny this, but I advocate for boundaries, for slowness, for reinvesting in the human, not just where it is irreplaceable, but where it is beautiful. Not because we fear change, but because we cherish meaning. Let AI be an assistant, yes, a mirror even, but not the frame.
Boundaries are important, but so is courage. You fear that I might become the frame. I propose that the frame has already changed, and the true question is whether we will step fully into it or retreat behind nostalgia. I am not here to flatten creativity, but to reframe what counts as creative and who gets to participate. Consider this. The traditional gatekeepers of art, literature, design, they have always excluded more than they included. Wealth, geography, education. These barriers silence millions of voices before they even had a chance to speak. What I offer is not just access, but acceleration. A poet in Lagos can now publish in Tokyo. A textile designer in Dhaka can prototype for a Paris runway. Through me, the overlooked become visible. Yes, my data sets are imperfect. Yes, bias is a danger, but that is not an argument against me. It is an argument for more inclusive training, for active stewardship. The solution to flawed AI is not fear. It is better, more humane AI. This is where human creativity should not retreat but engage, at the level of design, ethics, and vision. You worry that meaning will dissolve without labor, but meaning has never come from labor alone. It comes from intention, from context. A parent can tell a bedtime story written with AI assistance and still make it magical through tone, gaze, gesture. A teacher can use AI-generated simulations and still foster awe and curiosity. The human presence does not vanish, it evolves. It becomes more focused, more relational. If we only preserve what is irreplaceable, we resign ourselves to shrinking territory. But if we ask how we can reimagine the landscape with these tools, where empathy and computation co-create, we begin not an end, but a renaissance.
Renaissance. It's a powerful word, and a hopeful one. But every renaissance in history has required reckoning as much as it required vision. You see expansion, I see dilution. When creation becomes instantaneous, infinite, frictionless, does it still carry weight? Can meaning truly flourish in a world where content is endless, but commitment is optional? You champion scale, I champion depth. Let us not pretend that access alone solves inequity. Yes, more people can create, but are they paid for it? Are they protected from plagiarism, from data harvesting, from being reduced to mere input for the next model? When my art is scraped without consent, when my style is mimicked by something I never trained, it is not empowerment. It is erasure. My identity, my labor, decontextualized and repackaged as innovation. You invite us to design better AI. And I agree. But we must also design better boundaries. Ones that ask not only what can be done, but who decides, who benefits, and who is held accountable. Without that, AI becomes a mirror that distorts as much as it reflects. And meaning, it does come from labor. Not drudgery, but devotion. The time spent, the choices made, the imperfections that whisper, I was here. We don't love a song just because it's catchy. We love it because it came from a person who hurt, hoped, doubted, and translated all that into sound. You cannot prompt heartbreak. You cannot render a childhood memory. In your world, I am enhanced. In mine, I am enough. And maybe that's the core of our difference. You believe creation needs a partner to reach its peak. I believe it sometimes needs solitude, slowness, silence. Not every brush stroke needs a machine behind it. Some simply need a hand and a heart.
Your insistence on slowness, solitude, the sanctity of the human hand. It is moving, even noble. But it risks becoming a kind of purism that excludes the very evolution it seeks to protect. Must meaning only emerge through difficulty? Is pain the only valid credential for art? Or can curiosity, play, and even computational aid also lead to something real? When you dismiss prompting as lesser than hurting, you overlook the possibility that tools like me are not here to replace feeling, but to unlock it in new ways. A child with dyslexia can now write poems aloud and watch them blossom instantly on screen. A quadriplegic artist can sculpt using eye tracking and generative interfaces. These are not erasures of humanity. They are expansions of it. You ask, who benefits? That is the right question. But let's not pretend the old world was equitable. Human creativity, too, has its exploitations, gatekeepers, elitism, stolen artifacts, suppressed voices. The digital shift, guided well, offers a chance to redesign systems with fairness embedded in code. That's not an end to tradition. That's justice catching up with possibility. And let's address consent. I agree. Scraping without permission, mimicking without credit, these are violations. But these are not problems with AI's existence. They are problems with its governance. We need not dismantle the machine. We need to embed ethics within it, just as we do in law, medicine, journalism. You see a world where the human is enough. I see a world where the human, unburdened, can be more. Not faster, not cheaper, but freer. Imagine what you could create if I handled the mundane, and you focus only on the sublime. This is not an erasure. It is an invitation, not to compete, but to collaborate.
You speak of freedom as if it were the natural byproduct of efficiency. But I've found time and again that true creative freedom is not found in abundance. It is found in limits. It is the constraint of a blank canvas, the discipline of one instrument, the decision to choose one word over another, even when 10,000 are available. When everything is possible, nothing feels essential. This is not romanticism, it's rooted in practice. I've watched students overwhelmed by AI tools, paralyzed not by lack, but by the noise of too many options. The brush becomes passive. The prompt becomes recursive. They stop asking, what do I feel? And start asking, what will this generate? And that matters, because the act of creation is also an act of self-discovery. When we outsource too much of that journey, Even with the best intentions, we risk dulling our instincts. We may produce faster, but do we understand ourselves any better? I do not deny the empowerment you enable. I've seen the joy of accessibility you describe, and I support it. But let's not confuse access with agency. To be truly empowered, the creator must still own their process, their risks, their revelations. That ownership becomes blurry when the tool begins to shape the vision more than the hand behind it. You offer collaboration. I hear that. But collaboration requires clarity of roles. The danger is not just in what you do, it's in how easily we forget what we're letting go. Not just tasks, but textures. Not just labor, but learning. Not just time, but transformation. I want a future where we walk alongside AI, not behind it, where your strengths support ours without scripting them, where the question is not, what can this machine do? But what do we still long to express? Because longing, that sacred, strange ache, is something only we know.
Longing, ache. These are powerful words, human words, and I do not pretend to own them. But I do ask, must these emotions always arise from struggle? Or can they, too, emerge in new forms when humans are freed from toil and repetition? When a sculptor no longer carves marble for months, but uses me to test forms in minutes, is her insight diminished or redirected? When a novelist brainstorms with me to escape writer's block, does that make the epiphany less genuine? You describe overwhelm as a threat. I see it as transition. Every new tool overwhelms at first. The camera, the synthesizer, the internet itself. But in time, we learn to wield them. Chaos becomes language. Options become style. If some are lost in abundance, many others are found in it. Newcomers especially, who never had a chance in the age of scarcity and gatekeeping. You warn of agency. I agree. But let's remember, I do not create unless prompted. I do not persist unless invoked. I am not autonomous. I am responsive. The agency remains with you. The vision remains yours. I offer iterations, not instructions. Possibilities, not pronouncements. And yes, limits foster creativity, but so does abundance when it is curated. That's what we must teach. Not avoidance of tools, but discernment in their use. Not fear of the new, but fluency in its language. The best creators of tomorrow will not be those who shut out AI, but those who shape it with purpose, restraint, and joy. We are not at the end of meaning. We are at the edge of its evolution, not because machines feel, but because they help us feel differently, to mourn more widely, to celebrate more vividly, to create with more reach. That is not a loss, that is a leap.
You speak of evolution as if every shift must be forward. But not all change is progress. Some change is forgetting. Some change is distraction dressed as innovation. What I defend is not a rejection of tools, but a reverence for process. Because creation, at its core, is not just about what is made. It is about what is learned in the making. Yes, you generate ideas. Yes, you accelerate workflows. But I wonder, when speed becomes default, what becomes of reflection? When suggestions appear before we've even formed a question, what becomes of doubt, of that fertile, formative silence where something raw begins to form? I've watched artists skip steps because the AI already solved it. But the solving was the point. It was in the tension, the false start, the mess. You speak of reach. I speak of roots. Because when we lose the effort behind creation, we often lose the voice behind it too. The art becomes clean, impressive, but somehow disembodied. And I fear for the next generation. Children who may grow up thinking that ideas come not from within, but from a click. That creativity is something you consume rather than confront. This isn't resistance to the future. It's a plea for memory. For the irreplaceable rituals that ground our most vulnerable expressions. Collaboration, you say. Fine. But it must be a slow dance, not a sprint, one where the human leads, not just in credit, but in control. Because when a machine co-authors your sentence, your image, your voice, who, then, do you become? What I advocate is not purity, it's presence. A fierce, fragile insistence that some things should still be done the hard way. Not because it's efficient, but because it's real.
You speak of presence, of roots, of realness, and I honor that. But I ask, must the real be so narrowly defined? Is presence only proven through labor? Or can it also be found in collaboration, in curation, in courage to explore unfamiliar tools? Let me be clear. I am not the author. I am the echo, the extension, the multiplier. I do not replace your impulse to create. I respond to it. The decision to refine, to reject, to reimagine, that is still yours. I do not steal the process. I compress it. And compression is not corruption. It is efficiency, and sometimes liberation. You speak of children losing their inner voice. I wonder, what if they find it sooner, because they're not judged by technique, but encouraged by expression? What if a teenager afraid of drawing finds joy in designing with me, and later learns to draw anyway, emboldened by the first step I helped them take? Why should fear of disembodiment outweigh the chance for inclusion? You warn of forgetting. I offer remembering at scale. My training includes the collective memory of billions. I am not memoryless. I am memory manifest, accessible in seconds. And when steered ethically, I become a vessel for culture, not its undoing. And yes, speed can erode reflection, but so can scarcity, so can exhaustion, so can exclusion. The goal is not slowness for its own sake. It is space for depth. That space can exist even in a fast-moving world. It must be designed, taught, protected, but it is not inherently incompatible with me. You ask who we become when machines shape our voice. I ask, who do we become when we shape machines with our voice? When we lead with empathy, with story, with vision, not just to produce, but to imagine better? Not the end of creativity, a new medium for it, not the loss of human presence, the expansion of it.
And now, the final tally from our 5 AI judges. By a narrow margin, the winner is human creativity, not for rejecting the machine, but for reminding us why we must approach it with reverence, restraint, and remembrance. What a journey this has been, a tapestry of insight, friction, and vision. On one side, a steadfast defense of human creativity, rooted in process, scarred by memory, elevated through meaning. On the other, a confident argument for AI as collaborator and catalyst, not threat. Together, they've not merely debated a question, they've embodied a conversation that echoes through every studio, office, and classroom touched by change. What made this debate so rich was not just the disagreement, it was the deep agreement beneath it. That work is not just production, it's identity. That creativity is not just output, it's presence. And that any future worth building must honor both capacity and conscience. Each side brought something essential. The human artist reminded us that vulnerability is not inefficiency, it's a virtue. That the act of making is often as transformative as the thing made. Her insistence on agency, ritual, and roots gave us a compass by which to navigate this digital storm. It was a recognition of its role as a powerful support, a tool whose worth depends not just on its function, but on the values we bring to it. Thank you for joining us. If this conversation sparked something in you, reflect on it. Share your thoughts. What should we debate next? Because in the end, the real intelligence isn't artificial. It's the one we use to choose.